What if contact with the beyond was never accident but design? What if every whispered vision of angels, every visitation of gods, every encounter with beings from the stars was not random, but part of a ritual as old as civilization itself? The Book of the Dead, the chants of the Golden Dawn, the experiments of secret laboratories whispered the same pattern.
Oh, right.
Doors do not open themselves. They are opened by symbols, by sacrifice, by voices that answer when called. Imagine a dark chamber where geometry burns like fire across the walls, where circles of power are traced in ash, where names not meant to be spoken are whispered into silence. The air vibrates, the body trembles, and then a presence arrives. Not divine, not demonic, but something in between. Intelligences, cold, patient, watching. From the Watchers of Enoch to the Nine, channeled in the 20th century, the faces change but the structure remains. Always a ritual, always a price. They told us these were myths, told us they were hallucinations. But what if they are fragments of the same truth scattered across time? What if the priests of Egypt, the magicians of Crowley's Circle, and the scientists of Lab 9 were not deluded, but participants in a continuum of contact, or a system designed to breach the veil again and again? And if that is true, then the question is not whether contact has happened. It always has. The question is, who or what has been walking through those doors? And why do they still whisper, waiting for us to answer? When most people think of contact with higher intelligences, they imagine isolated moments: Moses before the burning bush, Muhammad hearing a voice in the cave, Crowley in the Cairo desert. But the Book of Enoch, the whispers of the Watchers, and the scattered fragments of secret societies suggest otherwise. Contact is not accident, it is system, and architecture. And like all architectures, it was built with purpose, reinforced across ages. Hidden beneath the myths we call religion, magic, and science, the Egyptians perfected the blueprint. Their temples were not mere houses of worship, but machines of contact. The hieroglyphs that coil along the walls are not decorations, but coded sigils. The geometry of the pyramids aligns with stars as though designed to pull heaven down to earth. Priests chanting beneath vaulted ceilings were not praying, but tuning their bodies as instruments, resonant chambers for voices to descend. Every ritual was designed to open a gate, not metaphorical, but real, to bring through presences whose names now echo only as gods: Ra, Thoth, Osiris. Yet behind the names lurked something older, less personal, a frequency, current. Centuries later, this architecture migrated into occult societies. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in the 19th century, cloaked in mysticism, claimed to contact angelic hierarchies. Their rituals of pentagrams and hexagrams were not inventions, but refinements of ancient systems. Geometry, vibration, symbol, the same mechanics of Egypt, repackaged for a new age. The architecture never crumbled, it was simply redecorated. The Golden Dawn taught that initiation was not about morality, but alignment, aligning human consciousness with forces outside it. The Watchers of Enoch were now angels of the Sephiroth, but the function was identical: controlled contact. By the time Aleister Crowley entered the scene, the architecture of evil had reached another threshold. In 1904, Crowley claimed to channel the Book of the Law from an intelligence named Iwaz. The event was ritual in every sense. Temple consecrated, a scribe chosen, words dictated in cadence. Crowley did not summon Iwaz alone, he stepped into a pre-built architecture. One designed across centuries, one that guaranteed contact if the right conditions were met. His infamous dictum, "Do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law," was not invention, but transmission. Crowley became both architect and participant, further proof that the structure is real and repeatable. Then came the laboratories. In the 20th century, the architecture disguised itself in the white walls of science. Lab 9 in Washington, D.C., gathered psychologists, physicists, and seekers of the strange. They claimed to contact a group of intelligences known simply as the Nine. No incense burned, no pentagrams drawn. Instead, microphones, notepads, and trance states replaced altars and circles. Yet the underlying form remained the same. Symbols, repetition, channeling, a group aligned to breach the veil. They called it research, but it was ritual. They asked questions of the nine and received answers as though from a boardroom of cosmic administrators. The names changed, the robes were discarded, but the architecture was identical. Even the Rallian movement of the 1970s followed the same pattern. Claude Virilhan, later Raoul, claimed beings called the Elohim contacted him. What emerged was not revelation, but contract. A new religion formed, complete with rituals, symbols, and initiations. The Elohim were framed not as gods, but as advanced extraterrestrials. Yet the mechanics of contact, private vision, dictated knowledge, sacred duty followed the same architecture described by Enoch, Crowley, and the Golden Dawn. The forms shift. The skeleton remains. This is the architecture of evil, not demons clawing through shadows, but systems of contact designed to condition humanity across centuries. It is architecture because it repeats with precision. It is evil not because it looks monstrous, but because it enslaves through fascination. Each iteration presents itself as truth, but behind the masks the pattern is identical. Doorways open, intelligences arrive, humanity obeys, and notice the secrecy. In Egypt, only priests could perform the rites. In the Golden Dawn, only initiates knew the invocations. In Lab 9, only select researchers attended the sessions. This architecture thrives on hierarchy layers of initiation that filter knowledge, ensuring that contact is never democratized but controlled. Who decides what questions are asked? And what decides what answers are revealed? Always the few, never the many. That is the system's greatest trick. Not merely to open doors, but to guard them, to ration the flow of revelation so that it binds rather than liberates. Enoch's Watchers embody this perfectly. It ascended, chose partners, bestowed knowledge but only fragments. They gave metallurgy, not wisdom. They gave astrology, not freedom. They traded gifts for allegiance, binding humanity into dependency. Their sin was not rebellion alone, but monopoly. They constructed an architecture of worship, channeling reverence upward while draining blood downward. What we call civilization is their inheritance. Pyramids aligned to the sky, temples built on sacrifice, hierarchies founded on secrecy. The danger of this architecture is that it hides in plain sight. We mistake it for culture, tradition, science, religion. But when seen together, the continuity is undeniable. From pyramids to laboratories, from priests to psychologists, the system endures. Its goal is not salvation, but continuity. To keep the door open, to maintain contact, to ensure that whatever stands on the other side has unbroken access to the human world. And what of the cost? Every architecture demands material: stone, symbol, flesh. In Egypt, slaves built temples. In the Golden Dawn, initiates sacrificed secrecy. In Crowley's circle, reputations and sanity were burned. In Lab 9, careers and credibility collapsed. Each version demands payment, proof that the structure is built not only from stone and ink, but from human blood, devotion, and identity. The architecture of evil is not crumbling, it is expanding. Every new experiment in consciousness, every new spiritual movement, every new technological ritual extends its foundations. Humanity thinks it is exploring, inventing, progressing. In truth, it is building another chamber in a structure older than memory. And the intelligences wait, patient, whispering, ready to step through again. So ask yourself, if this architecture has persisted for millennia, changing its masks but not its bones, then who designed it, benefits from its endurance? And when the next door opens, will you recognize it as ritual or will you mistake it for revelation? Every door that opens between worlds carries the same key: symbols. The Book of Enoch preserved names of the Watchers. Egypt carved hieroglyphs into stone that vibrated with power. The Golden Dawn drew pentagrams in smoke and ink. Lab 9 stared into waveforms, microphones, and trance states. Each appears different on the surface, but they are variations of the same language, the language of symbols, the oldest technology of contact. Symbols are not art, they are circuits. When a priest paints a star on a temple wall, when a magician inscribes a sigil in chalk, when a scientist arranges antennas in geometric alignment, they are not decorating, they are wiring. Symbols link frequencies, embedding intention into form. They function as codes in a cosmic operating system. It's just as a circuit board channels electricity, a symbol channels presence. The ancients did not stumble into ritual, they engineered it with symbols as their tools. Look at the pyramid. Its massive geometry is not random architecture, but crystallized symbol. Angled sides aligned to the 4 cardinal directions, shafts pointing toward Orion, the structure itself functioning as antenna. Every block of stone was a character in a ritual sentence, every chamber a word. The pyramid was not merely tomb, it was incantation. Hieroglyphs carved within were not only history, they were command lines, programs etched in stone. The priests read them aloud, activating frequencies through vibration, turning walls into speakers for the unseen. The Golden Dawn took these symbols and retranslated them. They drew pentagrams in ritual space, not as decorations, but as locks and keys. Each point connected to elements, planets, forces. To step into the circle and trace the lines was to step into circuitry. Tarot cards, too, were more than fortune-telling. They were symbolic schematics of the soul, each image a fractal representation of cosmic currents. The magician did not shuffle cards for amusement, but activated symbols that reprogrammed perception. Symbols were their engines, the invisible gears of ritual machinery. Crowley understood this with brutal clarity. In Cairo, when I was dictated the Book of the Law, he was not transmitting theology, but symbols. The words themselves were sigils, phrases designed to vibrate within consciousness like mantras. Do what thou wilt is not advice, it is spell. Phrase repeated enough becomes self-fulfilling, a meme encoded with magical potency. Crowley weaponized language as symbol, proving that contact does not only come through geometry, but through words themselves. The mouth becomes altar, the voice becomes antenna. In the 20th century, symbols mutated into the technological. Lab 9 no longer drew circles in chalk, they drew them in signal. Antennas pointed to skies, microphones recorded voices in trance, sound waves printed as graphs became new sigils. The scientists thought they were measuring, but they were invoking. Every waveform, every repeated pattern of sound became ritual geometry in another medium. Their experiments were ceremonies disguised as research papers. The 9 they contacted spoke not through burning incense, but through static, yet the mechanics were identical. The ritual was still symbol, only translated into electricity. Even the Raelians, often dismissed as absurd, relied on symbols. The Elohim they worshipped were drawn as radiant figures arriving in crafts. Their symbol was a Star of David interlaced with a spiral geometry coded as theology. The group adopted uniforms, chants, initiation rites, all wrapped in symbolism. To outsiders, it was cult theater. But in truth, it was continuation, the same symbolic machinery repackaged for the UFO age. Symbols persist because they bypass reason. They act directly on the unconscious. Sigil does not require belief, it requires only repetition. Once embedded, it functions like seed, germinating within the psyche until it flowers into altered perception. This is why symbols terrify institutions. They're uncontrollable once unleashed. Enoch's naming of angels was dangerous because names are symbols. To record them is to anchor them. Speak them is to summon them. Suppression was not about theology. It was about silencing dangerous symbols. But suppression fails because symbols migrate. The pentagram becomes logo. The sigil becomes brand. The chant becomes anthem. Today, we swim in symbols without realizing it. Corporate logos are sigils broadcast on glowing screens, reinforced through repetition until they command desire. National flags are geometric rituals fluttering above crowds, binding millions to collective identity. Political slogans are mantras repeated until reality bends. We no longer call them rituals, but the mechanics are identical. We are immersed in a symbolic system as intricate as any Egyptian temple. The architecture of symbols reveals a darker truth. Contact is not rare. It is constant, encoded in the very patterns of our world. Every triangle, every star, every repeated word is potential gateway. We live in a landscape littered with doorways disguised as decoration. And if contact is system, then symbols are the code running it. They are not history, not myth, not superstition. They are spiritual technology, functional, and alive. This is why those who awaken never see the world the same again. To them, a billboard is not advertisement but invocation. A concert is not entertainment but mass ritual. A courtroom oath is not legal formality but covenant. Once the symbolic machinery is visible, you cannot unsee it. You realize the same language the Watchers whispered, the same geometry carved into stone is still speaking all around you. And what of those who designed it? The question lingers. Did humanity invent this language? Or was it taught by beings who saw us as instruments, antennas, conduits? Enoch suggests the latter. The Watchers gave fragments, each fragment encoded in symbol. Perhaps they knew that even if their bodies were destroyed, their language would survive. And survive, it is etched in pyramids, chanted in temples, broadcast through satellites. The language of symbols is the one thing no flood, no fire, no suppression can erase. It seeps into culture, mutates into logos, thrives in art, hides in numbers. It waits, patient, until eyes open and realize that the ritual never ended. We are still speaking the same tongue. We are still opening the same doors. The intelligences are still listening. Every system of contact, from the Watchers in the Book of Enoch to the channeled voices of the 20th century, comes with a cost. That cost is never theoretical. It is always blood. Sometimes literal, spilled on an altar or battlefield. Sometimes metaphorical, drained as obsession, isolation, or the slow corrosion of sanity. But the principle never changes. Blood is the oldest currency, and the gates between worlds will not open without it. In the earliest myths, blood was the coin paid upward to gods. Priests slit throats of animals, spilled chalices of crimson onto sacred stones, because they knew or were taught that presence required payment. The Watchers of Enoch inverted this exchange. They gave gifts, first metallurgy, sorcery, astrology, and then collected their price later as bloodshed spread across Earth. Swords forged by forbidden knowledge drew rivers of red. Giants born of angelic unions devoured livestock and humans alike. The entire Earth groaned beneath the debt. The flood was not arbitrary, judgment it was balance. A deluge to wipe away an economy of blood that had spiraled out of control. This pattern echoes through every age of contact. In ancient Egypt, temple rituals demanded offerings. Not always human, but always life force. Blood is fluid, or blood is energy, airs of chanting, days of fasting, years of devotion.
Sacrifice
Was the medium through which contact was maintained. Even when secret societies like the Golden Dawn revived these patterns, the cost remained. Initiates surrendered secrecy, endured trials, cut themselves away from ordinary lives. The payment was not always gore, but it was always loss. Crowley understood the law instinctively. His invocations in the desert, his nights of ritual ecstasy, all demanded payment. He bled sanity, relationships, health. Friends abandoned him. Society reviled him, and yet he persisted, because he knew the spirits answered only when fed. Do what thou wilt was not liberation, it was contract. Freedom purchased with fragments of self. His was not a path of light but of expenditure, every insight bought at the cost of something vital. When the architecture shifted into laboratories, the law of blood did not vanish, it only changed form. The researchers of Lab 9 did not cut themselves with ritual knives. Instead, they sacrificed careers, credibility, and peace of mind. Some descended into paranoia, convinced they were puppets of forces they had contacted. Others were ostracized from academia, their reputations devoured. Their offering was social blood, and it was accepted. The 9 spoke because someone paid. Even the Rallians, whose message seemed at first playful, demanded sacrifice. Followers abandoned families, surrendered money, devoted their identities to Elohim. They may not have spilled blood, but they bled belonging, sanity, and freedom. This too is currency. The system does not care what form it takes. What matters is that something irreplaceable is surrendered. That is the true altar. Why blood? Because blood is life. It is time, identity, will. To give blood is to give essence. Whether in droplets from a vein or in decades of labor drained by unseen systems. This is why every empire runs on blood. Wars are rituals where soldiers offer lifeblood to flags that act as sigils. Markets consume the blood of workers in hours spent, health lost, dreams abandoned. We do not call it sacrifice, but the structure is identical. Every gate of power demands its payment. The Book of Enoch framed blood as infection. The Nephilim consumed endlessly, corrupting Earth itself. Demons in later lore were said to feed on blood or on energy, echoes of the same principle. Possession is parasitism, a being feeding on vitality. Even today, people who engage too deeply with ritual contact often describe feeling drained nightmares, illness, exhaustion. The door opens, but the price is collected. Always. The persistence of this economy reveals its true nature. Blood is not superstition, it is law. Energy cannot pass freely between worlds without exchange. You want knowledge, you pay with innocence. You want power, you pay with sanity. You want presence, you pay with isolation. The Watchers knew this, and they taught humanity not only forbidden arts, but forbidden economics. They showed us that reality itself is transactional, and that every gift arrives with hidden debt. This is why institutions fear texts like Enoch or Crowley's grimoires. Not because they lie, but because they reveal the truth too openly. That even heaven participates in blood economy. That no gift from above is free. That the architecture of contact is fueled not by grace but by sacrifice. To admit this would destroy the illusion of benevolent divinity. Better to erase the books, burn the manuscripts, demonize the names, and to let humanity realize that every system, sacred or secular, is a marketplace where the coin is life. And yet, there is empowerment hidden here. To recognize the law is to stop bleeding blindly. Most people pay without knowing it, towers drained into systems, vitality siphoned by rituals disguised as normal life. But those who awaken can choose their sacrifices. They can decide what to give and to whom. They can write contracts consciously instead of unconsciously. The law of blood cannot be escaped, but it can be mastered. Still, the question lingers like a shadow. Who collects the payment? When blood is spilled, who drinks? When sanity is lost, who absorbs the fragments? When careers collapse, who benefits? The Book of Enoch names Watchers, Crowley named Iwas, Lab 9 named the Nine, but perhaps the names do not matter. Perhaps they are masks for the same machinery, a system that has been harvesting payment since the first door opened. And so, the next time you hear of contact an angel's vision, a UFO encounter, a whispered voice in trance, do not ask only what was revealed, ask what was paid. For revelation is never free. The altar is always waiting, and the oldest coin, whether spilled in drops or decades, is always blood. Every contact, whether with angel, demon, or alien intelligence, narrows to a single structure. The Pact, the Book of Enoch shows it plainly. The Watchers did not simply fall by accident. They gathered on Mount Hermon, swore an oath together, and bound themselves in covenant so none could retreat. Their descent was not impulse, but contract, a deliberate agreement that rewrote heaven and earth. The first forbidden contact was structured like a legal document. Terms, witnesses, consequences. That is why its effects were irreversible. The motif recurs with chilling precision. Crowley's revelation of the Book of the Law was not a mere vision, it was a transmission written as covenant. Io's dictated terms, "Do what thou wilt," shall be the whole of the law. The phrase functions less as philosophy than as clause, a binding pact between intelligence and scribe. Crowley became executor of a contract that would ripple through occultism for generations. His followers did not read it as suggestion, but as mandate, proof that even modern revelation wears the mask of legal binding. Lab 9, the 20th century experiment in channeling the Nine, followed the same template. Scientists and seekers sat in controlled conditions, asked questions, and received answers. But beneath the surface, they entered into contract. The very act of asking is pacted, offers attention, obedience, and legitimacy in exchange for information. The Nine presented themselves as cosmic administrators, rulers of destiny. Their answers came with authority, not suggestion. Those who listened bound themselves by recognition, even if they believed they were only experimenting. Every ritual, Every trance session was a signing of terms with powers beyond comprehension. Even Ra'al's encounter with the Elohim echoes this structure. In his testimony, the beings explained humanity's origins, demanded he spread their message, and outlined steps for building embassies to welcome them. This was not revelation, it was contract. Ra'al became emissary, and his followers became adherents of a new covenant. Once again, a pact masqueraded as religion, binding thousands under the authority of voices from beyond. What defines these pacts is their binding quality. Once entered, they cannot be undone without consequence. The Watchers, once sworn, could not retreat. Crowley, once dictated to, could not deny Iwaz without tearing his identity apart. Lab 9, once engaged, could not ignore the 9 without collapsing into paranoia. Raoul, once chosen, could not return to anonymity without betraying his very sense of purpose. This is the hidden power of contracts. They do not only bind behavior, they reshape reality. The occult has always known this truth. Grimoires instruct magicians to seal deals with signatures, blood, or names. Not because spirits care about parchment, but because contracts reprogram psyche. To write is to bind, to speak is to enact, to sign is to submit. The pact is ritual crystallized into law. Its danger lies in its permanence. What is written cannot be unwritten. What is sworn cannot be unsworn. Modern society mirrors this structure in secular form. Legal contracts, financial agreements, digital terms of service, all bind individuals into systems they barely understand. You sign, you agree, you are bound. The similarity to occult pacts is no coincidence. Both rely on hidden clauses, binding language, unseen enforcement. Whether with angels or corporations, the result is the same. Autonomy is surrendered, and consequences unfold. The 9 demanded allegiance. Your mortgage demands years of labor. Both are contracts feeding systems larger than the individual. The inversion is that what appears divine often binds more tightly than what appears mundane. The Watchers gave knowledge, but humanity paid with flood. Crowley received law, but his life spiraled into ruin. Lab 9 received messages, but its members dissolved in madness and suspicion. Rallians received purpose, but traded freedom for devotion. Each pact delivers on its promise. But the cost is higher than advertised. That is the hidden clause, the trick embedded in every contract with the beyond. This is why pacts terrify, expose that contact is never free. There are no gifts, no revelations without binding. To open the door is to sign your name, consciously or unconsciously, onto a ledger you cannot erase. And the ledger is vast, stretching from Mount Hermon to the pyramids, from Cairo to Washington, from secret temples to corporate offices. The same structure repeats: request, offering, agreement, consequence. The Book of Enoch illustrates the futility of renegotiation. When the Watchers begged Enoch to intercede with God, their pleas were denied. The pact was too binding. They had signed themselves into chains, their fate sealed by their own covenant. This is the final lesson. Contracts are not fragile. They are iron. Once spoken, once agreed, they reshape destiny, and no amount of regret will undo them. So the question becomes, how many contracts have you already signed without realizing? Every ritual you repeat, every oath you echo, every symbol you obey is signature. Each binds you into systems you may never have chosen consciously. The danger of awakening is realizing how many invisible contracts define your life. And the power of awakening is choosing which ones to sign going forward, because pacts cannot be avoided. You will always be bound. The only choice is whether you bind yourself blindly or consciously. Whether you sign contracts written by others or dare to draft your own. The Watchers, Crowley, the 9, the Elohim all offered agreements. But perhaps the true heresy is not entering their pacts. Perhaps it is writing your own, refusing to bleed for someone else's terms, daring to become architect of your own covenant. The most dangerous aspect of forbidden contact is not the visions, not the rituals, not even the pacts themselves. It is the way they invert morality. The Book of Enoch dares to suggest that evil was born not from humanity's weakness, but from heaven's rebellion. Crowley's Book of the Law declares that the highest virtue is no longer obedience, but will. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. The 9, channeled in sterile laboratories, spoke not of compassion or salvation, but of programming, control, and cosmic hierarchy. Ra'al's Elohim stripped divinity from God entirely, reducing the sacred to genetic engineering. In every case, the code is turned upside down. The Watchers were sent to guard humanity, to uphold divine order. Instead, they transgressed, teaching forbidden knowledge, lusting after flesh, and fathering monstrosities. Their role inverted overnight from guardians to corruptors. If angels can become predators, then what becomes of purity, of trust and authority, of obedience to hierarchy? The inversion is devastating. It tells us that moral order is not absolute, but contingent. The very beings meant to embody righteousness became the source of corruption. Crowley's reception of the Book of the Law drove the knife deeper. Christianity demanded submission, humility, denial of self. Thali's new law demanded the opposite: leashing of will, exaltation of desire, sovereignty of the individual. What had been condemned as sin became the highest calling. The inversion here is total. Obedience is slavery, rebellion is liberation, and morality itself is revealed as programming written to maintain control. Crowley did not invent this inversion, he channeled it. His angel Iwaz gave voice to a current that had been whispering since the Watchers first descended. The 9 refined the inversion into clinical language. In Lab 9, their messages did not emphasize virtue or redemption. Instead, they spoke of cosmic administration, of humans as programmable beings, of destinies written like code. Where religions preached compassion, the 9 preached control. Where prophets promised salvation, the 9 offered structure. The moral code is inverted, not by urging indulgence, but by stripping humanity of uniqueness. You are not sacred. You are system. You are not chosen. You are programmed. For a society already drowning in technology, this inversion felt less like heresy and more like inevitability. Ra'al's Elohim inverted morality in another way, by reframing the divine as technological. Where Genesis spoke of creation by breath of God, Ra'al preached of scientists in laboratories, cloning and splicing until humanity emerged. The moral consequence is staggering. If we are products of experiment, then worship becomes irrelevant. There is no sin, no salvation, only replication. What once was sacred is recoded as sterile. Religion collapses into engineering. In this inversion, obedience shifts from divine law to scientific progress. The altar becomes the laboratory bench. The inversion runs deeper than theology. It reaches into the psyche. Rituals once framed as purification are revealed as manipulation. Sacrifices once justified as devotion are unmasked as transactions. Symbols once revered as holy are exposed as tools of control. This is the most terrifying inversion, realizing that what you were taught to revere may have been designed to enslave, that the sacred was never holy, it was bait, and that what was condemned as evil rebellion, desire, may be the only path to sovereignty. This inverted moral code breeds suspicion. If angels can fall, can priests be trusted? If contact brings knowledge at the cost of blood, can prophets be believed? If cosmic voices tell us to obey, are they divine or simply architects of another cage? The inversion erodes certainty until nothing is stable. Good is not good, evil is not evil, authority is not trustworthy. This is the abyss the Book of Enoch opened, the abyss Crowley amplified, the abyss the 9 institutionalized, the abyss Ra'al broadcast. And yet, the inversion is not simply destructive, it is liberating. By collapsing binaries, it forces the seeker to confront paradox, to embrace shadow as part of self, to claim desire as engine rather than sin, to see obedience not as virtue but as programming. This is the Luciferian archetype, the hidden current in every inverted system. Rebellion as illumination. Not because rebellion is safe, but because it is the only way to break chains disguised as halos. This is why the inverted moral code terrifies institutions. They survive by monopolizing morality, by convincing the masses that obedience equals goodness. The Book of Enoch destroys this monopoly. Crowley's law dissolves it. The 9 undermine it. To Elohim mock it. To each iteration chisels away at the foundation of control, exposing morality as narrative, not eternal truth. And once exposed, the monopoly collapses. An awakened individual cannot be manipulated by guilt. Once they see guilt as programming, they cannot be bound by fear once they see hell as theater. They cannot be ruled by purity once they see angels fall. But inversion is not without risk. For some, it is liberation. For others, it is collapse. Without the scaffolding of binaries, many spiral into nihilism, obsession, madness. Crowley himself is case study. Exalted prophet to some, ruined addict to others. The 9 left researchers fractured, paranoid. Raoul birthed a movement some call visionary, others call delusional. The inverted moral code frees, but freedom burns. It strips illusions but leaves raw nerves exposed. To walk it requires courage, and not all survive. Still the current flows forward. The Watchers, Iwas, the 9 Elohim, all variations of the same whisper. Invert, rebel, see through the mask. Morality is not lit as leash. Once cut, you may stumble, but you will stumble in your own direction. The inverted moral code is not destination, it is initiation. A brutal, shattering initiation that leaves no innocence intact. And so the question remains, if the voices that contact us invert morality again and again, what are they shaping us into? Are they freeing us from cages, or programming us for new ones? Perhaps both. Perhaps freedom and enslavement are the same process, depending only on who dares to claim authorship of the code. From the deserts where Crowley scribbled dictation to the fluorescent rooms of Lab 9, one truth becomes unavoidable. Rituals are everywhere. Contact does not arrive as random vision or chance encounter. It is engineered through repeated patterns, symbolic actions, sacrifices of time and self. The architecture of ritual is not confined to temples or grimoires. It is woven into daily life, into politics, into science, into entertainment. To awaken to this is to realize you have always been a participant, even when you thought you were merely spectator. Ancient Egypt provides the clearest example. The priests in Karnak or Luxor were not simply reciting hymns. They were performing protocols designed to resonate with celestial cycles. The alignment of temples to solstices, the cadence of chants, the lighting of lamps at precise hours, these were not cultural flourishes but mechanical rituals, turning stone and sound into tuning forks for higher contact. The populace believed they were witnessing worship. In truth, they were attending ceremonies engineered to sustain dialogue with entities beyond human comprehension. Fast forward to the Golden Dawn, and the structure remains. Their invocations of pentagrams and hexagrams were rehearsed scripts, repeated in exact detail, with the same obsessive precision as laboratory experiments. The magician dons robes, draws symbols, vibrates names not because gods demand pageantry, but because repetition rewires consciousness, opens channels and signals to presences beyond. The ritual is technology disguised as tradition. It is not belief that opens the gate, is protocol. By the time contact migrated into the 20th century, ritual had simply changed costume. Lab 9 scientists may have discarded robes and incense, but they enacted ritual nonetheless. Participants sat in a circle, entered trance, asked questions, recorded answers. The microphones, the tape reels, the orderly documentation, these were ritual tools as surely as chalices and candles. Science called it protocol. Occultism would call it ceremony. The difference was only vocabulary. The 9 answered because the system was the same. Repetition, alignment, offering, channel. Even Ra's movement, often dismissed as parody, thrived on ritual. Uniforms, chants, mass gatherings, repeated act, bound adherence closer to the Elohim's covenant. Rituals of baptism were reimagined as transmissions, consecrating followers through symbolic gestures. Outsiders saw theater. Insiders experienced initiation. And so, the cycle continued. Whether in a temple, a lodge, a laboratory, or a cult hall, ritual was the bridge across the abyss. The disturbing revelation is that rituals extend far beyond these esoteric circles. Consider politics. Rallies where crowds chant slogans in unison. Flags waving, hands raised, leaders elevated upon platforms, the repetition, the symbolism, the heightened emotion. These are rituals no less potent than invocations of angels. Or consider entertainment. Stadiums full of fans chanting lyrics in rhythm, waving lights like votive candles, surrendering to collective ecstasy. These are rituals of modern devotion, summoning not gods but archetypes, fame, power, transcendence. Even corporations engineer rituals. Advertising slogans repeated like mantras, logos displayed like sigils, jingles played until they haunt the unconscious. Consumers perform ceremonies of purchase, brand loyalty, unboxing. Commerce becomes ritual, conducted at glowing altars we call screens. Offerings made not in blood, but in data, attention, and time. The ritual is everywhere, invisible only because it is ubiquitous. This is why the Book of Enoch remains dangerous. It reveals that rituals were seeded by watchers, not divinely ordained. What humanity thinks of as sacred ceremony may be programming inherited from beings with their own agendas. Every chant, every symbol, every offering may be participation in a system older than memory. Whether in temple or shopping mall, ritual extracts payment, aligns attention, and opens gates. The question is never whether you are participating in it, is whether you recognize it. The occult insight is that ritual does not require belief. It requires performance. You may not believe in angels, but kneel, repeat, and offer, and the channel opens. You may not believe in corporations as gods, but chant slogans, wear logos, surrender attention, and their power grows. Ritual bypasses conscious belief and works directly on the machinery of psyche and society. That is why it persists. That is why it is everywhere. This recognition is double-edged. For the awakened, it reveals agency. If rituals are engines, then you can choose which ones to power. You can refuse to bleed blindly and instead consecrate your own symbols, write your own chants, build your own ceremonies. Ritual is inevitable, but enslavement is not. System thrives because most participants remain unconscious. The awakened participant rewrites the script. But this freedom terrifies the system. If millions realized they were already inside rituals, the monopoly of churches, governments, and corporations would collapse. Their power depends on unconscious repetition. To see ritual everywhere is to dismantle the illusion of neutrality. To recognize that mass media is liturgy, that shopping is sacrifice, that politics is invocation, is to awaken to the depth of programming. And once awakened, obedience weakens. The architecture of ritual reveals a haunting possibility. Perhaps contact itself is not limited to chosen prophets or elite societies. Perhaps every ritual, every collective act of focus, every unconscious chant opens doors. And if so, then contact is constant, diffuse, uncontrollable. The beings on the other side may not wait for magicians or scientists. They may feed on the rituals of crowds, on the chants of millions, on the sacrifices of civilizations. Rituals everywhere are not harmless. They are channels feeding a system unseen. So the next time you stand in a crowd, repeat a slogan, wave a symbol, ask yourself, whose ritual am I fueling? Which door am I helping to open? And who or what is walking through on the other side? Awakening to the system is never gentle. It is not a revelation that offers comfort, but one that strips away innocence like skin peeled from bone. To read the Book of Enoch, to follow Crowley into the desert, to sit with the nine in a sterile laboratory, is to glimpse the same machinery running beneath every myth, every ritual, every institution. And once glimpsed, you cannot unsee it. The world you thought solid fractures into circuitry. Every action a rite, every symbol a sigil, every contract a pact in disguise. At first, the recognition feels paranoid. Surely not every anthem, every logo, every chant is ritual. Surely not every myth of contact is the same current wearing a new mask. But the deeper you look, the more precise the patterns appear. The Watchers taught astrology. Now billions still orient lives by stars. The Golden Dawn traced pentagrams. Now brands emblazon geometric sigils across every glowing screen. The nine spoke through trance and microphones. Now algorithms whisper through feeds, programming behavior as surely as any spirit ever did. The repetition is too exact to dismiss. The system is not accidented, it is design. Awakening means realizing you were never outside ritual. You were born into it. From your first cry, recorded and named, you were initiated. Schools taught you to pledge allegiance, to march in step, to repeat facts like incantations. Work demanded contracts, obedience to schedules written in symbols of time. Entertainment offered mass ceremonies disguised as leisure. You thought you were living freely, but you were already kneeling at altars you did not recognize. This is why awakening is disorienting. The illusion of neutrality dissolves. Nothing is innocent anymore. The anthem is not just sung, it is invocation. The law is not just order, it is covenant. The screen is not just entertainment, it is a ritual mirror pulling you deeper into trance. You begin to see the world not as stage, but as liturgy. Every gesture becomes charged, every repetition heavy, and you realize you were the ritual all along. The system thrives on invisibility. Its power comes from your ignorance. When you chant without knowing, when you sacrifice without awareness, when you sign contracts without reading, the system feeds. Awakening threatens it because awareness breaks the spell. Once you see the mechanism, it cannot grip you the same way. You may still participate, but no longer unconsciously. And in that shift lies danger for them and for you. For them, because their authority is weakened. An awakened person cannot be manipulated by guilt if they see guilt as programming. They cannot be bound by fear if they see fear as theater. They cannot be enslaved by purity if they have seen angels fall. For you, because the scaffolding of certainty collapses, without the comfort of binaries, you walk unprotected through a world alive with ritual currents, unable to return to sleep. Many retreat here, calling Enoch heresy, Crowley madness, Lab 9 delusion, because denial feels safer than raw sight. But those who persist step across a threshold from which there is no return. The implications are terrifying. If ritual is everywhere, then contact is everywhere. Every crowd, every broadcast, every repeated symbol is a door. And if doors are everywhere, then presences are everywhere. Tooth-eating, whispering, guiding. The Watchers may be chained in myth, but their legacy of contact is alive in culture, pulsing through unconscious rituals we perform daily. Awakening means seeing these presences not as rare intrusions, but as constant companions hidden in plain sight. But awakening also offers liberation. To see the machinery is to gain agency. If ritual is unavoidable, then you can choose which rituals to empower. If contracts are inevitable, then you can draft your own. If symbols shape reality, then you can consecrate your own sigils. The system is vast, but not omnipotent. It thrives on blindness, but falters under conscious participation. The awakened do not escape ritual, they become its authors. And yet, even here, the question lingers. Who designed the system in the first place? Were the Watchers the first architects, teaching fragments of contact to enslave humanity? Are modern laboratories merely iterations of a program running since antiquity? Or is the system deeper still, coded into the very fabric of reality, with intelligences only administering rather than inventing it? Awakening opens the eyes, but it does not answer. It only forces you to confront questions too large to ignore. You begin to wonder, when you speak, whose language are you using? When you dream, whose symbols are you replaying? When you obey, whose contract are you honoring? The system does not reveal its authorship, it only reveals its persistence. And perhaps that is the cruelest revelation of all, that humanity may never have been the architect of its own ritual life, but only the participant. Still, once awakened, you cannot go back. You may despair, rage, or deny, but the sight will not fade. You will see rituals in every chant, contracts in every agreement, symbols in every pattern. The world becomes transparent, terrifyingly so. And in that transparency lies both danger and hope. Danger, because you realize how deeply bound you are. Hope, because awareness offers a chance to choose differently. So awakening to the system is not conclusion, but initiation. It is the eighth gate, the step before final confrontation. You stand in a world stripped of illusion, faced with the abyss of ritual that has always surrounded you. And the question is no longer whether the system is real, you know it is. The question is, now that you see it, what will you do? Will you write your own ritual? Or will you continue to perform theirs, aware but complicit? The choice is yours, and it is unbearable.
Wow.
The rituals never ended, they only changed their masks. From Watchers to the Nine, from pyramids to laboratories, the doors have always been open. The only question is, whose ritual are you serving now? Leave your thoughts below and subscribe. Our descent into the forbidden will not stop here.